Edward, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. Real pleasure to be here.
So lovely. I'm going to pour you some water while I ask you my first question. I really wanted to just think about the crazy last 2 years we've all had.
Yes.
I mean, we talked about just being out. It feels so good to be out again. But with all of the social and political and cultural upheaval of the last couple of years, do you think that's had an effect on the way that creatives are working?
Yeah. I mean, I believe that anybody who thinks that we can work as we did before is totally wrong. I remember when we were sent home, because of the pandemic, and being in my office. I got into this industry because I like working with people. I love teamwork. I love communication. And all of a sudden, we were stuck at home, all over the country with my team, not knowing what to do. And we thought, what do we do in times like this? You have to pivot. As a creative, you have to pivot. You have to find a new way of working, a new way of being. And for me, it was really important that when we came out of this, that whatever we did in the past 2 years represented the times. So it was a lot of work, difficult, but I think we managed to sort of work it out.
Coming out the other side as well, too. And during the pandemic, you've had a number of groundbreaking covers. Yes. Can you talk us through these covers and, what was your thinking behind them as well? I
mean, I remember was it in March when the shows were over and then we came home and we were sent, we were all in lockdown. And I kept hearing that, people over 60 had to stay at home and, my aunts and uncles, they were all so petrified. And I said to the team, what we need to do is show that it's okay. It's okay to be over 60. So who did we track down for a cover? The iconic film actress Judi Dench. Because for me, it was very important to show that, it doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter about COVID. We still needed our elder statesmen and women to know that they were adored and loved. So we had that cover.
That's so important.
It's so important,
right? And the creative industries do not do that very well.
No, but it was very important for us. And then I remember looking outside my window and seeing the postman. Remember when we were allowed to go to a supermarket for one day? And then seeing all this these incredible women working in stores. And it just struck me that even to leave your house at that time equaled death, right? So it was really important that we had these essential workers, key workers on our covers. So from Judi Dench, we pivoted into 3 key workers. There was Nagas, the train driver. Then we had a lovely nurse and a girl who worked at Waitrose in a beautiful hijabi. Then from there, remember, we were still at home. We still didn't have the access we always had, the access to photographers and style. We still didn't have that. We were still... And I think that the early days in ID that you talked about, where, we never had any budgets, we just had to make things work, really kicked in. And it was like, this is the time we're in, let's make it work. So from there, I thought, we needed a break, a reset. For the first time, I live opposite Hyde Park. I saw the seasons change. And it was a very important time to talk about sustainability and the world we lived in. So I commissioned 14 artists and photographers to just shoot landscapes around England. So, it was a reset moment. We had to really reset to see where we're going next. And then, the social upheaval happened with the death of George Floyd. And at that time, I had one cover set to go and I killed it. And then a second one and a third one. Something wasn't feeling right. And I think all creatives will understand when something's not right, I can't really let it go. But I just knew, and then when the whole social upheaval happened, I just realized, oh my God, these people who'd given their lives, these activists who'd given everything they had, their whole lives, they needed to be on the cover. So we shot Marcus Rashford, who, was working with the government to feed so many kids at school in Adjoa, and we shot 40 activists inside. And for me, that moment was very, very symbolic of what a magazine can do in times like this, how we can reflect the world we live in.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very proud of those covers.
They're really beautiful covers and so inspirational. And I love the idea also that out of creative limits comes innovation as well too. And you know, from the really early days, you talked about that activism and that pushing that story. From the early days, you've really been doing this, and you've really been pushing the needle on representation. Your Vogue Italia cover in 2008 is a great example. But can you give us some advice to everyone here, fellow creatives, who really are trying to push the representation in their own industries? How do we all make it a priority?
For me, one of the things that you have to be constantly fearless. Fear is what really stops people. You know, I got the job, and I remember saying to my assistants at the time, if I'm going to get fired, I'd rather be fired for what I believe in, and whether it was activism, whatever you want to call it. But I believe that you have to challenge the status quo. You have to carry on doing that in any industry you're in. And I was very, very lucky that the vision we had at the time, or, you know, the vision I had with the team was really embraced. It was time. Timing was also very important. But I'll say, don't be scared, don't be afraid, and always question. Always.
So important. Do you feel, and do you think other creatives have a responsibility to be part of social and political and cultural conversation?
I mean, I always say that, that's what Nina Simone always says, an artist needs to represent the times they live in. I really believe that. In my whole career, I was never isolated in a box. I would always look around what was happening in the world and reflect it. And it's what we did, in lockdown. And what's the question again? I'm so sorry.
Just if you think that artists have a responsibility.
Yeah, no, we have a deep, deep responsibility. You know, these issues we talk about, when you look back in 100 years, it will give you an idea of what COVID was like.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and so I think we really, really do have to reflect the times we live in.
Yeah. So it feels so urgent.
Very important.
And also to push things forward.
To push things.
Make change.
Always be unafraid.
Yeah, no, that's really great. When you're working, I mean, I think we all recognize that you're such an incredible storyteller. When you're working, do you get inspired by something? What's your process like? Can you talk us through that just a little?
I mean, you know, I look at everything: movies, TV, digital, the streets. I'm so curious. I'm always so hungry that I never stop. And then I also have a really great team. When I started, I always believed that sort of a multitude of voices is stronger than just one. So my team are all ages, all races, all religions. And by having that core team, we're able to sort of have conversations, you know, that are happening out there in the world and not living in a silo. So for me, it's very, very, very important that the team reflects that. Yeah. You know, the world we live in at large.
Yeah. And is that process one of a lot of dialogue with your team as well, too? Are there other storytelling forms outside of fashion that you draw inspiration from? Yeah. I
mean, I love film. Directors like my friend Steve McQueen, Barry Jenkins. I love cinema. It's been one of my biggest inspirations growing up. So I do sort of look, and even to music and art, you know, Amwako Boafo, all these incredible new artists who are sort of around. So I'm very open, you know, creatively.
Did you go to the cinema when you were a kid? And
I remember watching, you know, Godfather, all these incredible Scorsese movies, and cinema really shaped who I am and how I work, in the sense that, you know, when I was styling all the time, a lot of stylists they'll go to the shows, the collections, and they'll like this dress, and that dress will have to be in the photo shoot. And with me, I remember finding that really difficult, because my mind was so blown by all these incredible films that I would watch, that I had to create a character for every photo shoot I did. Just like the movies, I had to create a character. They had to have an inner life. I would give them, it was almost like playing children's games. I'd give them an inner life, characters, where they lived. And at the end of that journey, clothes will appear. So I wouldn't just take this and put it on. It will have to fit the arc of the character. And I would spend hours obsessing over a nail color or a haircut. Most people here know you're all in film, right? Unless it's right, you can't really move on. So I think film really sort of, inspired how I work, my work.
When you create those characters, do you tell other people about them, or does it all exist in your head?
It's all in my head, like a crazy person.
Amazing, amazing.
But you know, obviously you work with a photographer, and you sort of let them know, you know, what you're thinking, and they come on board with you, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a great segue, and to my next question, which is I want to talk about how you and your team sort of build out those creative ideas. How do you go? What's that process like of collaboration?
I mean, I love collaboration. You know, my team are very vocal. They're all very talented. They, you know, some of the best journalists in the world, some of the best editors in the world, and I believe that, you know, I'm kind of a shepherd. You know, I don't dictate. You know, I mean, I know what I like ultimately. You know, you have to be very fast. I make decisions very fast. But there's something beautiful about when you have a team that can lead you on a journey. You know, that can make you question things that you thought you knew, that can bring new things to you. I mean, I'm always so curious. I'm so curious about the world. I'm curious about fashion, music, art, film, that to have a team who sort of have the same feeling, it's pretty incredible. So, you know, we go from, you know, who should be on the cover this month. You know, we always talk about people who are capturing the zeitgeist. So the process really is, you know, a lot of conversation, a lot of interaction, and people not being afraid.
Yeah, that's such
what's on their mind.
You can't create if you have fear, can you really? Or you can't collaborate if you have fear. It's you in a bubble. That's so inspiring, and I think that's so important for filmmakers as well too. What do you think? So you work together, you have all these great collaborative ideas, you hear from your team, but you also have to lead. And
you have to lead,
editor.
yes.
What do you think makes an editor great?
I think a great editor has to, like we said, listen. You have to take everyone's opinions on board without making people feel less than. But ultimately, you have to be decisive. You have to be decisive. You have to, even if it's the wrong answer sometimes, you just have to make some kind of a decision. You know, there are those times where you're kind of stuck, but very rarely. So you have to be welcoming, you have to be open, like we discussed before, but you have to be decisive. And you also have to empower your team. You have to mentor your team. I wouldn't be sitting here today without great mentors like Franco Sanzani at Italian Vogue, Terry and Trisha Jones at ID. Mentoring is key to having a good team. I think those old days of people, you know, the editor walking in and throwing down the bag and screaming at people, I think those days are gone.
Same with the film industry as well, too. I mean, the reckoning that we've been through in the last couple of years is about that. We need to work differently.
It's a change, a seismic change that needed to happen, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So film, you know, everything you're saying just feels so relevant for film, for performance, for music. You know, it's really about collaboration. Lots of filmmakers work with the same editor for many years, like Thelma Schumacher-Powell and Martin Scorsese, and they really develop a shorthand. Do you think it's important for you and for other creatives to work with the same people so that you can develop that sort of creative shorthand?
I can talk about this in two ways. When I started in London, I mean, early 90s.
Not that long ago.
You know, it was the period that they referred to as grunge. And we were a generation of image makers, myself, Corinne Day, Jürgen Teller, you know, people who are now, you know, Steve McQueen, people who are now seen as, you know, sort of leaders in the industry. We all started at a time where you had to have your voice. So you had to work with the same people over and over to develop your voice and develop your look. And, you know, and I remember I would always work with Craig McDean, the photographer, and Pat McGrath, the makeup artist. And we would literally, we were so obsessed. We would drive to Edinburgh to shoot somebody every week for 6 weeks to create a 6-page story and idea. So that was really important. But in the second half of my career, which is sort of when I became a creative director, editor, etc., I realized the beauty of the diversity of perspective. So then the second phase of my career was sort of getting people together, you know, mentoring, as I said before. But I went from sort of being isolated with a core group to now being able to sort of share vision. So really, right now in my career, I'm really loving that. I'm really loving, opening up, having conversations, and not just in my office, in other industries, like what we're doing here today, you know, art festivals, and so I feel like, yeah, we're in the big flat, as they say. You know, everything's really sort of coming together. So I really enjoy that.
Amazing. And what inspires you personally? You've been in hibernation. We've all been in hibernation for the last couple of years. What do you do? Like, if you're feeling a bit dull or you need to sort of spark your own creativity, what do you do?
Oh my God! The streaming. I mean, the streaming has literally changed everything. I remember when I was young, I'd always want to go to the cinema, but now I can switch on Netflix. I can switch on Amazon, Hulu, and I can watch brilliant directors like Steve McQueen create a TV show like Small Axe.
It's amazing.
Barry Jenkins do Underground Railroad. I mean, what's that TV show that I love so much in France? Call My Agent. So for me, when I'm not working, I'm literally obsessed with film. TV. I'm also obsessed with podcasts and sort of audio. I feel video. I feel that's also the way forward. You know, before we worked on, you know, you were in the magazine world and the film world and the music. Well, now streaming's changed all that. So really, I'm really honored to be able to watch the work of these brilliant image makers at the click of a finger.
It is amazing, isn't it? And it does just open up opportunities for audiences as well, too, because like Steve's beautiful Small Axe series, 5 gorgeous films, if those went out in cinemas, people would have to be there on the day. You have them on the BBC and people can discover them, word of mouth. I mean, it really does open up lots of possibilities. We still love that collective viewing experience.
Of course we do.
It's part of an overall...
But what I love, especially, what I love about now is the fact that you can live in Japan, you can be in Russia, you can be in America, and create a great piece of art that will be seen across the world. I mean, look at, you know, this week, Squid Games. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be in America or England. You can be anywhere and be able to watch these great filmmakers and creatives from all across the world. That I'm so excited by.
I'm so excited about that too. And, you know, I have a 14-year-old who's watching Squid Games, decided he wants to speak...
It's sick, but incredible.
Should I be worried about this? I haven't watched it yet. But he's decided he wants to speak speak Korean. I mean, it's so inspiring to sort of open up your mind to loads of possibilities.
Did he watch it with subtitles or in...
Good question. I haven't asked him yet.
Ask him.
Been a bit,
I like the original language.
Yeah, I think so, because he's so interested. So a creative person, you know, sometimes people think of you as people as either being creative or business. Do you think creative people also have to think about the business side of their work?
Yes, you have to. But for me, a creative person has to disrupt. It is our duty to disrupt the system. You can't just sit on your laurels and think, oh, I'm okay. You have to break the rules. You have to take chances or you will be stagnant. I remember when I started up, you know, British Vogue, and I created a manifesto before I even got the job, to be honest. And I remember speaking to certain women and saying, you know, what do you think of British Vogue? And they were like, we don't see ourselves in it. You know, we don't see a hijab. I don't see myself in it. My sister who's black, I don't see myself in it. So I really wanted to create a magazine for the times we lived in, but also a magazine that harked back to the days where everybody was welcome in the pages of Vogue. So it's been my mission, really, to sort of, you know, democratize, I should say, the magazine. And everything is still seen through the prism of high fashion. Like, there was this notion that, oh, diversity equaled down market when I started. I mean, then I put Oprah Winfrey on the cover, covered in jewels, looking like Elizabeth Taylor, and there was nothing you could say. Yeah. So I think, I had to teach myself, you know, this fearlessness I talk about to just really carry it on.
What's so beautiful about that is you have been fearless, you've been an innovator, you've taken risks, but it's also been really great for the business as well.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So.
I mean, as we know, you know, whether you're a filmmaker or whatever, the bottom line matters. And when the industry and sort of the magazine found out, oh my God, diversity sells. I mean, now look, you look on the runways, black models everywhere. I mean, on TV, black people, you know, not just black people, minorities, I'll say, you know, are everywhere because they sell. At the end of the day, the bottom line is they sell. And it goes back to what I've been saying before. If your product is ending up in Korea, in America, in China, why won't you have people behind the scenes who can tell you or encourage you even more how to please those, that part of the world?
Yeah. No, I was totally struck that this morning walking here, I looked at a couple. I mean, every fashion magazine has a person of colour on the cover now, and really that has been such a disruption that I think you really sort of started a fire, didn't you? With
I mean, when I started, there was the notion that black people don't sell on covers, Indian women don't sell. But I just didn't understand why. We live in a world where we're so close in all walks of life. So we tested it, and then Rihanna, first woman of color on the September cover, was the best-selling issue for years and years. Then I did an issue with the Duchess of York. I'm so sorry, Duchess of Sussex, my friend. I should be embarrassed.
We won't tell her.
And again, that broke all records. So I think now when I look at all these magazines and see the change, I am very proud, but I'm also very proud that a new generation can look in Vogue or any other magazine and think, oh my God, if I can, I can be this. My mother always said, if I can see it, I can be it.
So true. So,
when they see themselves in the magazine, unlike maybe, some of us who grew up back then, they belong. That's really important to me, that people feel that they belong.
Just following that, I wanted to ask where you think this, so you've really sort of pushed the dial and that diversity. Where do you think that we're going? Where is it going to lead the creative industries?
I think that hopefully diversity will just make the creative industry a better place. Like I said before, diversity of perspective is so important to any industry, whether it's film, whether it's music, whether it's art. We can no longer just have one view. We can't have that. And I mean, I remember when I came to Vogue, I did a manifesto, like I said, and it really, really worked out. So I'm just hoping that, people who just put those black symbols on their phones when the Black Lives Matter happened, people who, are always sort of performative with inclusion. I hope all that stops. I hope that these companies now really employ people behind the scenes, people of color behind the scenes, that these companies, give mentorship programs, scholarship programs, not just for students, but also for the mid-level, so people can get to the top. Because as a lot of people in this room can testify, sometimes when you start at the bottom somewhere, you don't necessarily make it to the top because of, I don't know, biases or whatever. So bursaries that can take people from mid-level to the top, to executive positions, to my position. So that's really what I'm hoping for all industries, really.
That's so exciting, and I think that's an area that people don't think about, is that sort of management level. How do you lift people
how do we lift it
into cultural decision-making leaders, the people who make the decisions. I'm going to open to audience questions because it's a conversation and we wanted you guys to be part of the conversation. But I've got one more question. So creativity, when Julie introduced the program, she said creativity and convergence are part of our themes this year. Have you, just looking outside of even your own work and the way friends and fellow artists are working, have you seen those lines blurring recently?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the big flat, which is like fashion, music, art. We all operate in the same sphere. I mean, you look at Emma Corrin, the gorgeous actress I love. She's now the face of Miu Miu. You've got Steve McQueen and Riz Ahmed, who are my contributing editors, who don't just write about film. Luca Guadagnino directing fashion films. Zendaya modeling for Valentino. It's such an exciting time. And all these industries merging together can only be great for the world, essentially.
Absolutely, it's a big cultural conversation.
Yeah, like Kim Jones and Waka Wafu. I mean, so now to step out of your industry and collaborate with somebody, it's no longer it's the norm almost, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's what we have to carry on. I mean, historically, we've all existed in silos, even within Vogue itself. British Vogue did its own thing, American Vogue did its own thing. smaller magazines like, you know, Taiwan Vogue, whatever, they were all in the corner somewhere. And the beauty of this whole restructuring we're doing now is we're now sharing content across the board. Mm-hmm. We're sharing videos across the board. We're sharing features. And I feel like before there were 3 strong Vogues, like French Vogue, British Vogue, I guess Italian Vogue. But now we can lift all 26 Vogues up. Mm. We can lift it all up, so we're really a beacon of excellence. So yes, even though we don't work with other magazines, within the Vogue staple, there are sort of junior Vogues and senior Vogues, and this new way of working is so incredible. Just sharing, community. Yeah. I think that the essential word that we need moving forward after COVID is community. You know, no man is an island, so we all have to sort of help each other however we can. And you know, there's a certain, I mean, I just came from Paris, the shows, and there's a certain kindness I've also noticed. Yeah. So, you know, we have to really practice that as we move forward. We're not going back to the old world. So back to your question, definitely communication, collaboration, community, all those words. Oh my God, I remember, my mother was a seamstress, as most of you know, and I would spend sort of days and days. I was obsessed with my mother. I was days by her side, helping her make clothes, and this was even before the age of 10. And she had a magazine that she imported, she sort of imported from America, called Ebony. And I don't know if you know Ebony magazine. Ebony is a premier sort of black magazine. And that was my gateway into fashion. And oh my God, Diana Ross, Iman, I literally was lifted into a world of that I didn't know existed outside of Labrador. I mean, I lived in Labrador Grove, you know, Council Estate. And I was sort of transfixed seeing Diana Ross, women like Jane Kennedy, these Donna Summer, all these iconic women from the 70s, just living their lives, but also just being so creative. You know, Diane Carroll, the actress. And these were sort of the first women who made me think, oh my God, there's a life out there that, even before I knew about fashion, that there was another life out there away from sort of my neighborhood. And, you know, I got to work with half all those women. Iman's one of my good friends. And when I tell them the story, they also talk about moments in their lives when they realized, oh my God, whether they saw a magazine or, you know, had Diana Ross, you know, was discovered to be a designer. So, you know, you have to see it to be it. And I think that should be everybody's, you know, catchphrase in this room. When you're making your films, you know, when you're casting, it's so important. You know, think of the next generation. They need to be seen. And you can really lead the way by showing that everyone's welcome.
That's so important. And do you, when you were coming through, you've spoken about your mother as a big influence. Did school nurture you? Did school nurture your creativity? Or who else, until you got into the professional world, which you started very early, who were those people who really helped you get to that point?
I mean, look, I grew up in an African family, and if you grew up in an African family, you're meant to be a doctor or a lawyer, that's it. And I remember I was being very academic at school, but always loving sort of making clothes with my mum. I was a seamstress. But I never thought that would be I never thought that could be a career, because in my head I was going to be a lawyer, and that was it. And it wasn't until I started modeling at 16, I was spotted on a train. And I entered the fashion industry, and I realized, oh my God, styling, this is really interesting. And that's how I sort of realized what was my calling. And I had a mentor, Simon Foxton, who discovered me on the train. People like photographer Nick Knight, Terry and Trisha Jones, who gave me a job at ID when I was 18. I mean, I knew nothing, but somehow they saw something. You know, going back to Franca Sanzani again, you know, Anna Winter, who gave me my first job in America. And I've been very lucky. That's why I keep saying, please mentor people. It's the only way, you know, I could access this world I live in, you know, because people mentored me, so very important.
Across multiple ones.
I don't sleep.
Do you sleep? Yeah.
I don't sleep. I wake up at 5 a.m. I work out every day. I mean, you know, like I said, I mean, now my role's not just even England anymore. I'm in charge of all the Vogues in Europe, so the time zones are different. Italy, France, Germany, Spain. But like, it goes back to saying having the best team in the business. You know, I've got my features director, Giles Hill, and my comms director, Emily here, but having the best of the best people who also, like me, don't sleep. Yeah. I remember moving over from America and trying to call a member of staff at the weekend, and it was like, I'm in the country, you can't call me. But I was like, okay. But now I have a team who will call me at the weekends, and I can call. So I think you really need a network of people around you that you really trust. I can't keep emphasizing that. You know, no man is an island. So, you know, it could be you and a friend, you and 3 friends, you know, to sort of 50 people, but there has to be something that connects sort of all of you, whether it's, I don't know, the search for truth, you know, whether it's, I don't know, diversity, whether it's
insomnia.
Even just, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, apart from the usual sort of casting, and I also believe that the ways in which companies employ staff has to change. We have to go into areas where we've never been before. Like, we have a program at British Vogue where we go out into, you know, areas like where I grew up and find people, bring people in from those areas. Because a lot of times people hear about, you know, film, the British Film Institute, Vogue, whatever, they're scared. You know, they've been othered for so long. I mean, I was othered my whole life. So people who've been othered have to sort of be given the welcome, almost like an embrace, like, you know, you're welcome. And that means going out to find them in places where you necessarily, you know, wouldn't, in areas where you necessarily wouldn't, in schools where you wouldn't necessarily go, you know. Yeah, I mean, that's what we did. So that's what I continue to do.
So important to not look in your own small circle.
Yeah, it's not just a small circle, you know, everything. Like who your father is. Yeah. That's got its place. I'm not saying that's not right, but I would rather find the next Steve McQueen in a school in, I don't know, Brixton or Tottenham, but we have to step outside of our comfort zones when it comes to finding people and casting.
Right.
Oh my God, I mean, as a creative person, I mean, my demons are like my best friend at the moment. I mean, even coming here, I was literally a mess. I was tortured. I can't do this. That never leaves you. I mean, but that's what makes a creative person, the questioning, the not believing in yourself, or the doubts. But all I can say is, you know, you just have to push through it. And you can either push through it, I don't know, basic things like, I don't know, meditation, but surround yourself with people who can lift you up when you're in the doldrums. I remember being a teenage editor and always being filled with doubt, but I always have a couple of friends who I could call. In that moment, they'll be like, you know what? You're good at what you do. Focus on that. So, you know, yeah, I mean, that will never leave you as a creative person. But I think you learn the tools to break through that, really. The beauty of, like I said, you know, Condé Nast is going through such a transformation. You know, we're sort of very digital first at the moment. We still have the magazine, which will be even more incredible paper and covering. But we have a video department, and they're always looking for sort of directors. They're always looking for ideas. They're always looking for films. So, you know, I guess you have to, Emily. Give him your card.
Emily,
what I'm saying is, in each magazine, there's always a department for whatever you want to do. Like, if it's about features, if you want to write something that nobody can, you contact Giles. You know, if it's about beauty and fashion, you contact Sarah. What I'm saying is, even on a masthead, you will realize who's where.
Yeah.
And really, that's the easiest way. Of course, we also all live on social media. I spent my whole day scrolling. So, you know, you can tag me, you can tag British Vogue. Yeah. There's so many different ways now of sort of approaching collaboration. Well, I mean, before we came, we were having a conversation, and you got Freeze next week, and I was like, you were like, oh my God, why don't we put Freeze and sort of
LFF.
together. And I was thinking, Fashion Week, it's also the same time as like the Music Awards. Why don't we bring them together? I feel like what COVID has taught all of us is we have to be one big industry and not just in our little silos, one big creative industry. So I think moving forward, I mean, I'm so excited to have these conversations with you and sort of other industries to see how we can best do that. And in terms of sort of people coming to the magazine, you know, we work with sort of My Brilliant Career, a group of young people who come into the office and then they spend a day sort of sketching, writing, learning. I mean, and I'll gather them in my office and go, who do you want to see on the cover? And they go, Zendaya. And who's on the new cover? So
amazing.
So, yeah.
Well, Edward, thank you not just for being so inspiring, but being so lovely.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.